Hello and welcome to the Player 2 podcast. I am your co-host, Rade Strasavlovich.
And I am your co-host, Dave Leary. It is good to be back with you, Roddy. We took a week off, so hopefully we still have our dedicated core audience with us who should be liking and subscribing as always.
Definitely. I took the family down to Legoland, the San Diego Zoo, and just because that wasn't enough, we hopped up north slightly and went to Disneyland, which was a blast as always.
Very good. It sounds like a good quality vacation, good chance to get away in the middle of the summer heat. But we are back and ready to hit the industry news as we do on the Player 2 podcast.
We are, and this is part 2 of our top 10 list little duo. The first one was top 10 things we like about games. This is top 10 things we dislike about games.
And I am looking forward to that because I expect you have a rant, though it's not really much of a top 10 list. It's some kind of random number is what we did last time. I didn't even count to know how many it is, but I'm sure we've got plenty to discuss when we get to the discussion.
We'll see what we get through. So let's go through the news of the week really quick. So first off, EA completed their move to private. So that news came out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this. I am trepidatious. I think this absolutely for sure means layoffs in the near future at a minimum. I have some concerns about potential content restrictions going forward, given that the purchasers are mostly the Saudi Wealth Sovereign Fund. And they're taking on an awful lot of debt here. EA is taking on an $18 billion in debt, which means that just servicing it each year is going to be well north of $1 billion, right?
Yeah, closer to 2. So yeah, it's the largest leveraged buyout in history. So this was done with borrowed money. I'm not too worried about content censorship. I mean, EA's never really done anything particularly controversial in that space. If you remember going back, the president of EA or the CEO used to be part of the ESRB board. So it's not in their DNA to do like uber violent, controversial, M-rated content. It's just not what they do. They've got their evergreen sports business that'll service a lot of that debt. That tends not to be very volatile. I think it's everything else that they're doing that is subject to the same winds that the rest of the industry is facing. So we'll see. But yeah, definitely a pretty big debt load that they have to service.
I guess I will chime in and say I am still a little worried about the content side of it. I don't know what kind of mandates will come down from the Saudi side of the house, but I don't think I'm just talking about violent content or that kind of stuff. But certainly LGBTQ representation in games has been a topic for a while, and whatever EA was doing there, it may potentially be at risk going forward.
Yeah, I mean there wasn't much. I don't think.
The BioWare games certainly had some nods to that, and certainly this is something that I think you and I are pretty aligned on wanting to see in games. So
yeah, I mean we'll see what happens. That's not all in news. So there is a congresswoman in Mexico who is a gamer and is coming after Sony for the discless PlayStation stuff. So that'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yes, and I'm absolutely going to butcher her name here, I think, but I believe it's Iris Reyes. She is clearly a gamer because not only is this in her portfolio, but a while ago in Mexico, she blocked an excise tax that would have classified video games as violent. And she clearly spoke with some authority on the topic of games. Her discussions and her speeches on that topic of the excise tax were pretty clearly informed by her experience as a gamer.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think we're starting to finally see core gamers getting into politics, especially at a younger age. And hey, lo and behold, they've got information and opinions. And it's not like the old US government people that are like, well, I don't even use email. Like these folks, like you look at AOC, she's live streaming games and stuff. This is a good thing, I think.
Absolutely. And that was what struck me about this story as well, too, that generational shift is finally occurring. We know that the gaming audience is starting to age a little bit, and as they age and they take the reins of power in some legislatures, we're starting to see a shift in the way people talk and think about games, and a little more of an informed opinion when they do legislate on gaming issues.
Yeah. Hey, one other news bit speaking of legislation that I wanted to sneak in here. So it's looking like Roblox might be the first game classified as a very large online platform, or VLOP, in the European Union. And that would subject it to a bunch of legislation and regulation. I think we're going to get a decision on this pretty soon. That will be interesting to watch.
For sure. And if anything qualifies, it feels like Roblox would.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, man, I think this is probably a good thing. Like they're like social networks in general. I don't, not going to get into the debate of good or bad, but I think they've skirted regulation given the impact that they've got for too long. And I think some smart, sensible regulation is a good thing. And we've talked about this before. If it's going to come from anywhere, it's going to come from the European Union. Like the US Congress just doesn't get it. They're paralyzed. They don't get anything done. EU seems to be where it's at. And then we kind of get a trickle down effect on that. I think GDPR, or the data privacy protections that came out of there, have been a good thing in general. As much work and pain as it has caused me to be compliant with that, in the net, it's just a good thing for consumers.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, Roblox has certainly been running kind of unfettered for a while. And you and I have talked on this podcast about their business model and our concerns around that. So, not all government regulation is bad. Sometimes these companies need a bit of a check on their practices before they completely run rampant. So I look forward to seeing what comes out of this. I do imagine there's some bean counters in the bowels of the Roblox organization that are very concerned about how this is going to affect their bottom line. But hey, that's the business they're in, so they need to deal with it.
It is. Before we get to our top 10 list, one other surprise thing that popped up this week is GTA 6 is going to do an extended look of the game on Netflix, not going to Gamer Press or anyone else. So that kind of surprised everybody. And all the LinkedIn pundits are making ridiculous takes about what this means and all sorts of stuff. What do you think, Dave?
Boy, I honestly had not thought too much about what this means, though it certainly indicates that Rockstar feels like Netflix is a good player in this space and can reach an audience for them. We'll see how it goes, I guess.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what we find out, if anything, about how much Netflix paid for this. I don't think it was free. So yeah, we'll see.
Well, GTA, was it GTA 5 was one of the first big kind of gets for the Netflix gaming platform. They were able to get a version up on there.
Yeah, I don't want to comment about that because I'm working with someone who has insider info on that. So I will just omit that. But yeah, that happened. That was a thing. Is this a continuation of this? I don't know. Strauss Zelnick just came out and he said it's merely one of the hors d'oeuvres for the full GTA 6 launch.
Excellent.
And pre-order numbers are unprecedented and astonishing.
Of course, I don't think either you or I are astonished by that. I think we've been anticipating this to be the biggest release of the year.
Yeah, and I just want to remind everybody, I'm like, why are you pre-ordering digital games? Like, what? Like, are you buying extended warranties too? Like, what's the matter with you? This makes no sense.
It's to be part of the experience, Roddy, part of that day one experience, and talk about how you pre-ordered it.
Ridiculous.
Yes.
Anyway. You know what? That's my 11th gripe. We started it early. I just added it to my list. Pre-ordering digital games.
There you go. Well, we definitely have a list. Would you like to begin? Because I think your list is longer than me. And to remind folks, our discussion topic this week is kind of our least favorite things that games do, of which Roddy's list is extensive and well-reasoned, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is going to be like Festivus. You're going to have to pin me in the feats of strength before I get off my list. All right, I'll start with kind of a top of the funnel type of thing. This is very common in mobile and it drives me nuts. And that's bait and switch marketing, where I get an ad for a game and I look at it and like, wow, this looks really cool. And then you get the game and you're like, what the hell is this? Like, this is not what I just signed up for. I've downloaded it. And it's usually means an immediate deletion for me. That drives me nuts.
That's a good one. I think anytime you are kind of muddying the expectations of gamers with the way you market a game and you promise things, or you promise things that you can't deliver, that's rough on the consumer side for sure. It gets people excited. All the pre-release hype that you've built is kind of misleading, and it's a problem.
You know what drove me nuts about this? I got an ad like it was a while ago about I think it was Gardenscapes, one of these very popular mobile games. And it's kind of got this thing where, they've got the mom and the child, they're shivering and you have to save them to get the gold and stuff. And it's these cool little puzzles with some physics in it and everything. I'm like, oh, that looks fun. So I grab it and I'm like, what that's like 1% of the game. Like the rest of it is this other stuff I don't care about, and I have to earn my way to play the game. So I actually have to do work to get to the thing that's fun. And I'm like, this is absolute trash. Yet for some reason, it's still a highly rated, highly successful mobile game. Drives me nuts.
Do you feel like this problem is more endemic on the mobile side? Because I think I do. I mean, I can certainly think of cases of some misleading marketing on the PC side. You know, the early promise of No Man's Sky and that kind of thing spring to mind. But I don't think the No Man's Sky developers were doing anything more than overpromising a little bit. I don't think they were actively misleading folks as to what the game was.
Yeah, it's more egregious on mobile. I think the problem on console and PC has largely been corrected by the market punishing people for doing this. Like you remember what the bait and switch with AAA games for a while, where they would show a trailer and then you or I might look at it and be like, yeah, that's rendered. And the team's like, no, that's all in-game stuff. And it turns out it's just game models that were thrown into Maya and animated. And you could always tell because like the animation blending is just doing stuff that no game engine is going to be able to do. And they get punished for that. And so for the most part, that is stopped. There's a lot more honesty there. And then on PC, if you lie to the customer, man, you're just doomed. They just having none of that.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I remember those days of cinematics not looking anything like the game, though that's maybe that particular problem is maybe less and less true now, where gameplay and cinematics are a lot more on par with each other.
Well, it was mostly trailers, right? And so like, you'd get some next gen AAA game as part of a franchise. You're like, wow, that looks amazing. I'm like, yeah, that's not the actual game. And then you get the game and you're like, okay, this is good. It's just not as good as the trailer. Yeah, nobody does that.
All right. Shall we move on? Have you got another one, or would you like me to give you one?
I do.
All right, give me your next one.
Poor difficulty progression in a game drives me nuts. In particularly, I don't mind a game getting more difficult as I progress through it. In fact, I prefer that in general. I want the game to push me back and give me a challenge. What drives me nuts is when you're going on a difficulty progression, all of a sudden the slope changes 10x and you just bang your head against a wall. You're like, what the hell? Like it's either indicative of the game was rushed out and it was poorly edited and something got cut at the last minute, something's missing. Like it's just a decision point where I get to the game and we're like, yeah, I'm not going to play this anymore. I'm done. And I hate it.
Well, this is an interesting one for me, Roddy, because I think about games I have worked on and how we've approached difficulty. And I assume you're talking about playing on sort of whatever the standard default normal difficulty is and having that curve be smooth more than the extreme cases of the easy mode or the super difficult mode made for the hardcore.
Well, let me give you a more specific example of this. Like, I don't think it's difficulty setting specific. It's when something that you've done before, and maybe let's say, you're taking out enemies and you had maybe a 70% success rate with your strategy. And all of a sudden the thing just doesn't work anymore because the enemies are just overwhelming you. And it's not a matter of learning a new tactic. It's like literally the thing that you did against the thing that you did it against before just no longer works because someone decided, hey, this section of this level is going to be more difficult or what have you. That is maddening and really, really frustrating to experience as a player. And I just don't know why. There enough games I've played have done that.
Well, when I think about it again from the developer side, I think teams tend to spend their most time on that sort of default level of difficulty throughout the game, and when they go to balance, I certainly know in my experience when I've gone to help balance the hardcore difficulty or the ultra easy difficulty, it's a lot more of a slipshod process usually. And maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe companies should just spend more time on this stuff. But often to make an easy mode or a difficult mode, it's just like, okay, we're just going to kind of lower the health of these units or take some units out here or whatever else you need to do to kind of make it generally easier. I think there are some analytics applied to this in some cases, and depending on the game genre, but it's not always a scientific process, as I think you probably know.
It definitely is not. Like it's just, it tends to be indicative of a rushed product because like no designer wants to do this. QA teams are really good at giving feedback, and they're probably someone from QA is watching this screaming. He's like, I told them that you should fix this, but they didn't listen to me. Like, and it's almost always like something came in late. it wasn't fully explored and tested, and it winds up either getting patched or deprioritized for a patch later, and it's just, you encounter it as a customer and it's just not enjoyable.
Yeah, I think that's right. I will give you a quick related one that I suspect might be on your list somewhere. But I would be content to never again see an overly lengthy and restrictive tutorial in a game. I think the modern style of teaching me to play a game while I play it is significantly superior to what we used to do 10 and 15 years ago. I'm done with jumping through a bunch of scripted hoops and reading giant walls of text explaining features in a game. I don't want to do that. I want to get playing what the intended experience is as quickly as possible.
So this ties almost exactly, and we did not plan our lists. We have not seen each other's lists. I'm just telling everyone now, with my third gripe, which is excessive exposition in a game, right? This is a game. This is not a book. This is not a movie. You should have an in-depth story and a great game, but I want to experience it and learn about it through interactivity. I don't want to read and be gated and be prevented from doing this or that. I want to learn about the game and the story as I play through it. Great examples of games that have done this. 20 some odd years ago, Half-Life, interactive cutscenes. Still sort of on rails, but you weren't locked down. Why is that not the standard? God of War, fantastic. Red Dead 2, phenomenal. No one would argue these games do not have deep, engaging stories, but they're told using the strengths of the medium, which is interactivity.
I will generally agree with what you said. I will quibble a little bit. I think your definitions are maybe a little too narrow. I'm okay with a more narrative experience where I have to read a lot. I will go out of my way to say Disco Elysium is one of my favorite games, and that game involves an awful lot of reading. There is certainly interactivity involved in it, but it is a game where primarily you're interacting via dialogue trees and reading large blocks of very well written text. I think that kind of experience is okay, and there's got to be room for it. I generally share your view that conveying narrative in a game the way Half-Life did is a fantastic method of doing so.
I don't have a problem reading. I love to read. It's when it's not done in an interactive fashion. So a talk tree, reading and getting backstory lore through the items, like in an RPG, like a Skyrim or something like that. Fantastic. Absolutely do that. There's tons of little inside jokes and things tied to different fiction in World of Warcraft. Love that. What drives me nuts is when it's literally like, no, you don't get to drive anymore. You're going to look at this thing and read this thing and do nothing else and have no agency or choice over it while I tell you my awesome story about the game. I don't want that. If I wanted that, I would watch a TV show or a movie or something like that. I want to interact with it.
And that, I think, is an absolutely fair criticism. And certainly, I think Disco Elysium rises to the bar you're talking about of interactivity and player choice. So I understand it. I just think we do need to make room for sort of more narrative experiences that have minimal interactivity because that's what the designer wanted. I think there's space for that in the industry, and there is a customer base for that as well.
Yeah, I think I go back to God of War Ragnarok when I'm following Atreus around and you're getting that backstory about what's going on between Kratos and his son and all, that's a great way to do it. You're learning all this stuff. It helps that they had stellar voice acting. Anytime you cast Chris Judge as a character, one of my favorite actors from Stargate, if everyone remembers, that was Teal'c, the alien that was part of the SG-1 team. Great voice, great actor, did a great job in that game. That's how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, narrative is hard to do in games. The interactivity of it makes it immediately more challenging than telling a linear story. And we continue, I think, in the industry to work on ways of conveying story and narrative that in ways that do not mess up the interactive core of what a game is trying to do. And the examples you provide are fantastic ones.
Number 4 on my list, stupid innovation. When someone's like, hey, you know what? We need a USP or unique selling point for the game. So we're going to put this new thing in the game just so that we could talk about it because no one's seen it before. But it's like, why did you put it in here? It makes no sense. It doesn't fit with the overall thing. It's not entertaining. Sure, it's different. Or even worse, you took something that's considered a standard in games. Fortunately, very few do this anymore, but it's when someone gets the idea, it's like, you know what? On a keyboard first-person shooter, WASD, we're not going to do that. We're going to come up with a different control scheme. Nobody does that anymore, I don't think, that I've seen. But like, that's
Have you
stupid
played
innovation.
Crimson Desert yet? Because Crimson Desert clearly did
Oh,
that with
God.
the control scheme,
Oh,
and yet it
man.
worked for them. So once again, I think there are some exceptions to your rule here, Roddy. I will push back a little bit and say, without any kind of innovation, without somebody taking a risk and saying, "Hey, we're going to try something a little bit differently," the genius of what Crimson Desert did, if you want to call it genius, is to cram a very, very complex control scheme onto a controller. And, it's tough to learn, tough to wrap your head around for the first 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. But after that, it is super effective at doing
Well,
what the designers intended. So
if it works, it's probably not stupid. If it gets you to the point in the game where you're like, why did you do this? It's not great. Like, I probably shouldn't beat up on this one because this was a younger dev, but I judged a game one time for a GDC indie submission, and someone decided to reverse the camera on the mouse controls. So like, when you scrolled up, it scrolled down, and like, it was the most frustrating, illogical thing. I don't know why they did that. It was so bad. Like, it just bordered on. It was unplayable.
yeah, I mean, once a standard is set for a particular control scheme in a genre, I think you at a minimum have to come up with some really good reasons to depart from it. You and I are certainly veterans of the RTS wars back in the days of, hey, should move beyond left click or right click, and eventually that settled itself out. But that debate raged for a while, though. The younger listeners of our podcast won't really remember those days.
Yeah, glad that's done. Next on my list is a gripe when someone builds the wrong game for the particular platform that they're on, right? This could either be it was just ported over there to reach another audience and it's just never quite good. And you and I have been guilty of doing some of this. Like, we worked on strategy games that got posted or released on console. And I know why we did it. Like, I get it. And it's just, they sucked. Like, they just were not, like, the guys that did the work, not to diminish them, like, they did an amazing job making the stuff fit and making it playable, but just like, it just, the control scheme is wrong for that platform. When you see a mobile game that was clearly designed for mobile put onto Steam, it just doesn't work. It doesn't get well received. It doesn't perform. It just clouds up and muddies up the store with more content that just is never going to sell. That makes everything else harder to find. I think you have to look at the platform, what it does well, how players want to engage on that content, and build the type of game that fits those things, and not try to shoehorn the wrong thing onto that.
That's a good one, and it's a little bit related to one that I had on my list. I mentioned before that I get worried when developers kind of muddy the expectations of their players and don't deliver what they said they were going to. I think this extends not just to choice of platform, but what you do within a design itself. If your game is about solving intricate puzzles and figuring out something, once the player figures these things out, don't make executing the solution to those puzzles difficult. On the flip side, if your game is something like a platformer, which is about precise execution, don't make me do simultaneous complex puzzle solving at the same time you're asking me to master the execution of the jumps. I think knowing what your game does well, where it fits both on a platform and from a design perspective, is important to a cohesive experience.
Yeah, 100%. Like, if you need hyper accurate jumps and you're going to fall off the edge, like, that's probably not a good game for mobile where you could fat finger it and you're going to get really frustrated. Don't do that.
Exactly.
Man, you know what really chaps my hide?
What? Tell me.
Is cheating in multiplayer games. I can't stand it. And like, there have been so many solutions of how you want to address it. And it's kind of like this cat and mouse game between the cheaters and the devs. But when a game dev doesn't take cheating seriously in a multiplayer game, I'm done. Right? Like, I have no desire to jump into a first person shooter and get one shotted from across the map by some kid with a wall hack and stuff like that. And what drives me nuts, and something that I've been wanting to do for ages, and I would start a company to do this if I could get funding to do it, is I think this is an excellent use of AI to do pattern recognition and realize what the bounds are of human reflexes and what is possible and not possible, and call foul on cheating. And that is not like intrusive things like some of the other stuff that sits resident on your computer and other, like, I think this could be done. I think it could be pretty effective. I think we need to do something about it because it sucks.
That's a pretty interesting possible solution, certainly different from some of the more aggressive anti cheat systems that exist out there that are occasionally controversial with the fan base because they may affect performance or other things. I think that would be a difficult system to dial in and get right. You could do it over time, but anytime you think you know the limits of human reflexes, there's going to be some 14-year-old who has ridiculous teenage reflexes that proves that they can actually do that as quickly as you thought they could not. So it would be a tricky system to dial in, I think, but I do think that's an interesting option.
Yeah, it's one of those things I'm fairly confident that with a large data set, and you really need a machine learning algorithm to be able to look at that and derive insight about it. It's like it's too big for a human to sit in somebody's head. And like I think everything will just show up there and you could figure out how tight you want to dial it in or not. But that just seems like the way to go.
Yeah, and certainly most of the common cheats that are out there, which I agree, completely kill a good shooter, particularly. Most of the common cheats are going so fast, they're just, immediate snap to headshot in any circumstance, or even snap to a headshot of somebody coming from behind a wall. Those are the types of things that should be relatively easy for a system to get dialed in and figure out.
Yep.
So let me ask you if this one is on your list, because it may not be, because you and I sometimes come at games from a different perspective, but I think this is also endemic, particularly on the mobile side. Do you have overly aggressive monetization on your list? Because I frankly stay away from a lot of free-to-play stuff for precisely this reason. Every time I have a purchase pushed in my face, it completely takes me out of the experience. And, I think maybe mobile has moved away from some of the worst cases of this that was in the system. Oh, you're shaking your head. They're still bad? How can it possibly have gotten worse? Because even 10 years ago or so, it was pretty bad.
Gambling. There between gacha packs and loot boxes had to be legislated away for the most part, but gacha packs are still there, and there's just a lot of other sneaky shit like double click on this. Oh, I'm going to swap the button, and now you're on the store page. Like kind of that stuff still exists.
Does it bother you as well, or do you think that the mobile audience is just in a space where they kind of have learned to accept it and they're okay with that getting shoved in their face until they make the purchase to remove ads or whatever?
Both of those things are true. It still exists. The audience tolerates it. That drives me nuts. We cannot have nice things on mobile because of just the way everything is monetized, and like you just can't get any kind of traction. Like it drives me nuts that you can't sell Smash Brothers on mobile or a variant of Smash Brothers on mobile for $10, which is a phenomenal price for a game like that. It would be really fun, short play sessions on a phone. Like you obviously have to shrink a couple things down to make it work in that form factor, but that would be a really fun game. Can't do it. It won't sell. Nintendo content has gone on there. It did not perform well. Nothing premium does well on that platform. Everything has to be free to play or you'll just never chart. And if you don't chart, you don't get any of the benefits of the store. And it's just, it sucks.
That's a good, solid rant. I appreciate the nuance that you bring to that discussion as I am less of a mobile fan, I think, than I am a PC fan. So that space is less familiar to me, I think, than it is for you.
This is one I think you and I are going to disagree about because we do come at games differently.
All right, I'm ready. Spicy time.
Excluding roguelike games where this is inherent in their design, I despise repetitive content in a game. In particular, levels that I have to go back to and revisit where nothing's changed, where it's clearly just the equivalent of a recap clip show like they used to do in TV shows back in the day to save money. I can't stand that. And it's just like, I want to throw the controller down and just walk away from the game whenever I see that.
So I disagree with that less than I think you might imagine, though I could cite some kind of classic games that maybe wouldn't hold up super well today, like the original Halo that made heavy use of that exact mechanic to save, developer time. I will put a slightly different framing on it with one from my list that's pretty similar. I don't like when a game wastes my time. Depending on the genre, as you mentioned, roguelikes and maybe some RPGs and other things, I'm okay with mechanics that involve, grinding random encounters to level up or spending time sorting through my inventory. That's gameplay. You maybe don't like that gameplay and maybe that genre is not for you, and that's okay. But I do not like friction in games, slow UI elements, lengthy non-interactive segments like we mentioned, or any kind of busy work. And when you started talking about reusing content, I immediately thought about busy work. And if I'm going through the same level 14 times, then that really is busy work at some point. I'm not seeing anything new. The designer is no longer trying to delight or surprise me. So I I resonate more with your point here than I think you thought I might.
Yeah, I mean, you see it in some of the open world games where fast travel becomes a thing you have to earn, and I'm like, okay, I get you want me to explore at the beginning, fine, but after a certain point, I don't want to go through all the hassle to get from here to there. I mean, infamously bad was EverQuest about like, hey, I want to get from Freeport to Kinos. Well, I guess I better take off all my clothes and run naked because I'm probably going to die while I run through that. And so at least I won't have to deal with a corpse recovery. Like that's just and like every other MMO realized this, and they put fast travel equivalents of like flying mounts or a transport system or the horses in Dark Age of Camelot. But like it's just bad. I just don't like it.
It is an interesting thing, though. I agree about the EverQuest example, but I also think about games like Skyrim, where there is a fast travel mechanic in Skyrim, but often when you would walk in Skyrim, that's when you would find the most interesting stuff. To the extent I think that certain fans want that experience, it's interesting to note that in Skyrim, some of the more popular mods are things that actually disable fast travel and make the experience a little more I don't want to say punishing, but a little more of a forced exploration, a setup than the default game was created to be.
If it's dynamic and it's not just did you run into this mob's path or something like that on this time, like it changes with the seasons. Like something's going to be different depending on when you do it, time of day, time of year, gameplay state, all that stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like literally like you just have friction in the game because you didn't think to remove the friction, or worse, you're trying to bulk up your hours played. RPGs are notorious of this. Like, well, if you don't have 100 hours on an RPG, it's not valuable or whatever. So you try to bulk it up with just garbage tasks. And that's just frustrating.
I'll give you a softball. I think this one has got to be on your list somewhere, though you haven't mentioned it yet. Buggy bad launches. I think nothing kills a game faster than a really kind of rocky launch where a game has a lot of bugs and players can't even play the intended experience. We have seen some games recover from that, thinking about No Man's Sky again and some other titles. Cyberpunk 2077 was in kind of rough shape when it launched, at least on consoles. Is that on your list? I feel like it's got to be.
It bumped off my list because there's
you had other things that made you even more mad.
Well, it's mainly because there's enough examples of games that have recovered from this. And as I think more products move to early access, like you just don't tend to see those issues as much. Like if you see a buggy launch, it's just usually a sign of shovelware at that point, like where they're just throwing it out there and like they just don't care. But you can spot that a lot more easily now than I think you used to. And so I just don't waste my time on content like that.
Fair enough. We're running a little long this week, but I think that's okay. What else is on your list that we have not hit that you really want to get off your chest?
All right. What drives me nuts are sloppy, loose, or unresponsive controls in a game. And I'm going to make a broad generalization here that this happens more often than not in indie games. And it is the quickest way I could tell if the indie developer really cares about their product or just didn't and is just trying to do this as a learning experience or something else. Because like a true craftsperson is going to know like that this just dooms any game if there's latency or sloppy controls. And like within a couple seconds of moving around in the game, like I could tell whether this thing is going to be worth my time or not, regardless of the game design, just by that factor.
I'm right there with you. And when I was talking about time wasting stuff, that was near the top of my list of examples of that. We've kind of talked recently about UI and UX, and this can be really hard to get right in a game. It's something that a good studio will invest time in and energy in and effort in. But if you've got a bad way for customers to interact with your product, then your product is never going to be able to shine through if they're constantly fighting with the controls. So I think that is an excellent call out.
I
about
mean, the
things that we
example
hate.
I always give is like the moment you move Batman around in the first Arkham game, you know this is a solid product, and like this is going to be good. Like then you start layering everything else they did on this thing, you're like, oh wow, like this is going to be a masterpiece product. But it starts with that. If you just don't invest in that, like just I'm not going to spend my time with your product.
Absolutely.
All right. I think this kind of ties a little bit to what you were talking about with the tutorial, but like games that treat me like an idiot or a genius are really annoying. So I think we've covered the idiot side of things, but the genius is another one that bugs me. And this used to be a problem when adventure games were quite popular, where like you have to be in the head of the designer to understand how this puzzle works, and they just don't give you any clues. This is the equivalent of a movie or TV show with Deus Ex Machina. Like, God, that drives me nuts. Like, I think I've broken a controller because of that in a game before.
Yeah, and I would argue that that's really in the end of the day just bad design. It's a team that did not iterate enough or did not get enough testing on their product to kind of surface those issues. And those are things that should ideally shake out from playtesting. What's confusing a player? What's confusing the users? Where are they getting stuck, or where are they blitzing too fast or something? Both extremes are not great, and a good process will shake those things out.
If you are a producer or a studio head and have a junior to mid-level designer on your team that has never been to a traditional focus group where you sit behind a two-way mirror and watch people interact with the product, do them a favor and bring your designers in to do that. Because like I have not seen anything more effective than watching one of my designers jump up and down, screaming and trying to pound at the glass, yelling at the player for not getting something, to kind of teach you that people don't always interact with your product the way you think they will.
Excellent advice, and I think you and I both share a love of lots of iteration, lots of testing, both on the team and people outside the team. You got to have it in order to make a good product.
All right. Last thing on my list. It drives me nuts when games do not give me the place or the space to explore the game. Either I want to explore this new mechanic and see what I can do with it. I want to see how I can combine this or that. I want to play around with items and do other things like that. I want to walk over here and see what's going on with this thing if it's a more open game. But when I have no space to explore and I'm literally on the rails that the designer wants me to be on, it feels like I'm on those crummy, it was coming out of Disneyland recently, those driving games where you're on that rail and you're like, oh, look, I could steer maybe about this far left or right. Like, why? I don't want that. That's not fun.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just, to my mind, I'm not trying to minimize that one because I think it's a good one. But it is just the way that the philosophy around game design has modernized over the years, right? I mean, we have developed better ways of doing things, better ways of giving players those moments of choice and interactivity, which lead to moments of delight as the player does exactly what you're talking about. They explore the space that the game creates, and they feel they can get creative with the tools that the developers have provided for them. Those are always the best kind of games, and it's why some of the more odd and esoteric indie titles occasionally do so well, is because if you look at what's the common thread in all those titles, it's almost always that type of exploratory space that gives players some room to experiment and have fun.
Yeah, I want to put a finer point on this because like I don't want the audience takeaway is that Rade likes sandbox games only, because that's not true. And I'll give a non-game example about this is a year after you get an update for your iPhone, occasionally you discover a new feature in there and it feels magical when you do, right? When there's just something in there that it's fun to discover that you just don't need to put in the tutorial or handhold the player to discover in the game. You just let them through doing it, discovers like, oh, that's pretty cool. Now, it can be frustrating when that thing is like, wow, great. That would have saved me so much frustration in this game. I feel like an idiot for not saying, like, you don't want that. But like, you're just getting a chance to find some things and really play it the way I want to play it, and just realize there's, every game, whether it's a sandbox game or not, should have multiple ways to play it.
Well said. Well said. Have you aired your grievances? Do you feel your grievances are out there?
I feel pretty good about this. I got a lot of the things that frustrate me about games. I could probably go more and nitpick on a few other things, but I think we could leave it there.
It is a little sad that our gripes list is so much longer than our favorite things list, because I really do love games still, and I hope that our audience does as well. There's a lot to love, so
There really is.
We're just very picky, and we're grumpy old Gen Xers, so I think that's part of what this is.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if I would have this same list if I didn't make games for a living. I think I would have a different take on things.
Though our fans can be pretty picky, as we've seen from community discussions.
They can often be picky on the wrong things, Dave.
That's true.
But that's a separate discussion.
That is a whole separate discussion.
All right, game of the week.
I'll keep this quick. This is actually a bit of a revisit this week. I have talked about Grim Dawn previously in the podcast, as you know. I still consider it the best ARPG around. I know Diablo 3 and 4 still get the edge with Blizzard's signature polish and attention to animations and presentation, but I would still contend that Grim Dawn has better mechanics and pacing, a more interesting setting, a more robust way that you build characters. And a full decade after launch, and the reason I'm revisiting Grim Dawn a little bit this week, is they have a robust new DLC that just launched, Fangs of Astrakarn. It's their third major DLC, and it is a whopper of a DLC. It extends the content by almost a third. It adds a bunch of UI improvements, including a new difficulty mode for experienced players, and it is chock full of new systems and enemies and environments. I know a decade later, it's going to be hard to sell anyone on Grim Dawn who hasn't already played it, and I've certainly had some debates with some developer friends of mine about my passion for this game, but if you are a fan of ARPGs and somehow Grim Dawn has passed you by for the last decade, this new DLC is just a great opportunity to dive in and experience a robust, mature game at the peak of its content. It remains one of my top 5 most played games on Steam, and every few months I fire it up and try some other character build idea. So once again, highly recommended. Fangs of Astrakarn is the new DLC for Grim Dawn. You should check it out and play
Sounds good. All right. Well, that wraps up our comeback episode after a brief break. We'll be back next week with more content. If you enjoyed this, help us out, comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.